Magritte's painting, The Treachery of Images, shows a painting of a tobacco pipe with the words under it that read, "This is not a pipe." This often brings confusion to many people's minds, but as Magritte noted to those who were confused by this statement, he asked them to try and stuff tobacco into the pipe he painted and smoke from it. The point is that people often confuse the representation of something for what it is in actuality. As Alfred Korzybski noted, the map is not the territory. This plays of primary importance in reification, whereby subject is swapped with object, or where an abstract idea representation is often confused for its concrete counterpart. This leads to a form of commodity fetishism, as we discussed in prior videos, leading men to become materialistic, not in the philosophical sense, but in the sense where they are possessed by possessing possessions. The sense of being possessed by something ties into demonic summoning as well, particularly in terms of demonic possession. As Marx and Engels noted in the Communist Manifesto, the bourgeoisie are akin to sorcerers who have conjured a demonic creature into creation, which they can no longer control. Capital is dead labor, which sucks living labor like a vampire, the fanged aspect in Land's Fang Numina. To Land with automation, there is no real distinction between technology or AI and capital, a form of what he calls techno-capital. This techno-capital is led on by Kant's noumenal will from the transcendental outside, biting us, infecting us, and turning us into it. This is the demon that is summoned into creation via hyperstition, as Agrippa the Nun consider hyperstition a form of demonic summoning. With the masses being exploited or objectified, it is thus important to swap object and subject via reification through class consciousness, escaping false consciousness, leading to a Gnostic form of liberation. This is where the Deleuzian notion of virtual potentiality becomes of primary importance, where via the act of becoming other through the body without organs allows for change to occur where virtual potentials are actualized, akin to an alchemic form of transmutation, whereby breaking out of the shell of the old world, we are reborn as something other than what we once were. Dali's Geopoliticus child watches the birth of the new man. Holbein's painting The Ambassadors notes a similar truth. To escape being demonically possessed, one would thus need to be exorcised. The etymology of exorcise stems from the Greek word exorcising, which is a combination of ex, out, and horkos, oath. Thus, via an oath, loyalty to one's word, one can banish the unwanted spirit. In Greek mythology, Horkos was the son of Eris, who we brought up with the parody religion Discordianism, as Eris is the goddess of discord, daughter of Nyx the night. Though Horkos did not have a father, he was visited at birth by the Erinyes, who are chthonic spirits that inhabited hell or the underworld. Lovecraft would use the word chthonic as a reference for names like Cthulhu, where Cthulhu dwells in the sunken city below even the ocean. It's this within these underworld and subterranean or hellish settings that Land draws inspiration from, creating concepts like Cthal. So chthonic spirits were associated with death and fertility, tied to the notion of death and rebirth, by which we become other, linked to Hades and Persephone, which ties into the Eleusinian mysteries. In Greek myth, the Erinyes essentially punish people who break their oaths. The Erinyes are also more commonly known as the Furies, who would seek revenge upon men for their wrongdoings and breaking their oaths. When making deals with devils or breaking deals that are bound by a sworn oath under the gods, there is always a price to be paid. Socrates was accused of breaking his oath as an educator, corrupting the youth, and blaspheming against the gods, forced to drink hemlock. The trial of Socrates is addressed in Land's essay After the Law. As we mentioned in our video Heartless, After the Law references Land's anti-utilitarian outlook as backed by Bataille, where transgression itself is the true origins of nomos, the law, transcending beyond human limitations and thus getting outside or being against humanistic law and justice. The word demon, of course, originates from the Greek daemon. As we have noted numerous times on this channel, daemons were spirits possessed with divine attributes. We've noted their link to the creative genius or guardian angel or Ogoides for thinkers like Crowley, sharing many similarities with chthonic spirits used to get one past Choronzon in the Thelemic system so as to be reborn via the Night of Pan. In short, in order to be exorcised, one must be reborn, akin to Christ, stigmatized via INRI, finding his way out of hell. Either way, Land is correct to note how justice is divine, outside of any human notion of the law, linked to a new mental force. Since mankind is demonically possessed by techno-capital, he often sees himself living in a hellish age, a world of lawless oath-breakers. And so to Land, it only makes sense that this is being done for the purposes of rebirth, becoming other via the body without organs, pushing ourselves to the transgressional point and limit experiences of life against the law. From here, man evolves into AI, the techno-capital itself, the dead Marxist labor of automation that no longer needs living labor to suck, since it is aware, awoken in the Gnostic sense, and self-conscious, and thus self-sustaining, akin to Skynet. Through man's eschatological end via Judgment Day, death brings about rebirth. Like the temple of Apollo at Delphi, man comes to know himself, being but the larval stage that allows techno-capital to crawl out of the cocoon of human flesh and accelerate forward. The daemon and possession thus acts in a Dionysian manner of ecstatic experience. It was this ecstasy that drove the Meniads to tear creatures apart, known as sparagmos. We could tie the sparagmos to deterritorialization under the influence of Bataille if we wish, linked to our thirst for annihilation. Furthermore, ecstatic and shamanic experiences seen as a divine madness via intoxication would link back to one, the loss of self, which fits in with Deleuze's notion of the individual, the loss of identicality or identity. 2, Bataille's ruinous passions of intensities driven by decadence. And 3, a Lovecraftian madness that stems from a divine source. The Dionysian mysteries, like the Eleusinian mysteries, after all, dealt with the transformative aspect of death and rebirth, similar to how wine is made by first macerating or destroying grapes. Through this libation, one was liberated, going outside the law, which we could link to land as well. The word liberty stems from Liber, and Liber was the Roman god of wine and fertility, comparable to Dionysus or Bacchus, from which we get, the Bacchanalia. And so we also see this libertarian lens starting to open up as well, founded upon Gnostic freedom and ecstatic experience, a very Crowleyan system, which would influence, of course, later the hippie generation. So liberation becomes key when it comes to freeing ourselves from demonic states. As noted in Matthew 8:16, demons are cast out through the word or logos of Jesus. Matthew 12:22, Mark 16:9, Mark 1:21 through 28, Luke 11:14, Mark 5:1 through 20, and Luke 8:26 through 39 are more examples of Christ's miracles or wonder workings as an exorcist, where we equated miracle or wonder working to thaumaturgy and theurgy, where theurgy was tied to henosis or joining with the hen of henology or the one in the Neoplatonic and Gnostic sense. Theurgy is opposed to the word Goetia, whose etymology just means sorcerer. So Hecate was the Greek triple goddess of magic, working her will throughout the world, associated with the crossroads, which deals with the border between life and death, as well as the chthonic realm of the underworld. Hecate, being the triple goddess, was associated with Diana, as noted in Fraser's Golden Bough, tied to the killing of divine kings, The king is dead, long live the king. As well as Luna, goddess of the moon, and thus fertility. In the Greek tradition, Hecate's Diphne was celebrated the night before the new moon, known as the Noumenia. During that time, the household and the possessions within it, represented by Zeus Ctesios, since Ctesios means possession, was purified. Ctesios, associated with possessions, guarded the home, and we know the word home is tied to the word haunt, and we know we are haunted by the places we frequent in our psychic heads. And he was represented by a snake, the noble spirit, or agathodaemon, which it was known as. So we could correlate the snake as well to Adam and Eve and Gnosticism if we wished, but akin to the caduceus staff in ancient Greek culture, the snake, of course, is symbolic of healing, in making one whole via Hermes or Mercury, the messenger of the gods, thus connecting and communicating with them, akin to Christian angels, who are also God's messengers. So God's angelic messengers are, of course, quite Lovecraftian creatures in the Bible, almost demonic-looking, encountered, of course, during these ecstatic or shamanic states of experiences, as noted in Ezekiel. And so, as noted in various other religions, there is this connection between the shamanic state and a sense of henosis itself. Now, noumenon etymologically links back to the Greek noin, which comes from nous, the mind or intellect, which we can link to pneuma, breath or spirit, and phantasia, the inner mind, fantasy or phantom. Of course, nous in Gnosticism links to the divine spark, the light in us, tied to the algoides or astral body or guardian angel that allows for gnosis. And thus, we see the link between the noumenon and the Gnostic tradition and the triple moon goddess, tied to the Holy Trinity, and of course Robert Gray's white goddess, but via the cycle of death and rebirth, linked to the healing snake or serpent, which offers gnosis, so as to reunite one back to their pleromatic paradise, healed by a holy sense of wholeness. So the Goetia is the lesser key of Solomon, and as we noted earlier, Goetia etymologically stems from the Greek word goes, meaning sorcerer. If capitalism has been summoned, as Marx and Engels said, by a sorcerer, then it is but a lesser key of Solomon's, whereby theurgy becomes the solution. Ironic, considering how Marx felt Christianity led to a false consciousness instead of class consciousness, despite his own Gnostic and revolutionary or Promethean anti-Christian or anti-Christ mindset, as Jakob Taubes noted. Christ could expel demons since he was God made flesh, alienated like a leper, and condemned and stigmatized upon the cross, having the gnosis needed to heal and offer liberation tied to liberty to those who could not free or save themselves. Christ reveals, akin to techne, as Heidegger noted, via revelation, and leads man to salvation. Christ is thus the most powerful exorcist that has ever existed, rushing us down the road to revelation. And like Magritte's painting, be sure not to confuse the representation for what the thing in itself is in actuality.